If you've been going through life without having lots of energy and do not feel the sufficient motivation to do your tasks and chores that your day demands, it is going to be very useful and important that you understand how energy is produced, so you know which are the things that you can easily change and modify without leaving home and that do not require willpower. And that will allow you to produce more energy. And there are 3 key aspects that our energy levels are highly dependent on. So let's look at these 3 key aspects and how easily it is to change them. All production of substances in the body, and it doesn't matter which one you refer to, such as ATP, which is the energy molecule that all of our cells need, or any other substance such as the thyroid hormone, regardless of which one it is, every substance requires the following 3 things. You will require a good amount of raw nutrients to utilize as a source to be able to build these substances. Next, you need the manufacturing facility to assemble all these raw nutrients into the finished product. And lastly, you will want to avoid the things that will interrupt the production of these products. Those things can stop our production and are antagonistic processes, which are the opposite effect of what I want to create in this case, and with regards to production of energy. So what are the key aspects to understand about these processes? The first aspect to understand is that the most common and fundamental raw nutrient that helps us produce energy is glucose. But before you say anything, what I want to mention is that you don't need high amounts of glucose. It doesn't mean that I'm going to consume a tub of ice cream and be able to produce lots of energy, even though that sounds great. But this aspect has a logic and a balance within our organism that allows us to produce this basic substance. And in general, the most common problem that most people have when it comes to production of energy throughout the day has to do with the activation of this manufacturing plant that actually is called the mitochondria. The mitochondria, this organelle that exists inside of the cell, are the basis for energy. Mitochondria are inherited from the mother and not the father, so you can blame your dad for having low levels of energy. The next aspect to remember is that the mitochondria produces energy very similar to batteries. This means that it has a positive and a negative end. In batteries, we have electrons flowing from negative to the positive end, creating a charge. Around the membrane of the mitochondria, the electrons move on the surface much like a battery, and the electrons being negatively charged, they move with the oxygen, and this is the key to produce ATP. The crucial aspect of this is the production of ATP and the production of energy in your body. They're very dependent on the amount of oxygen that's present in the cells. Why is this important? Because if you compare production of ATP to a situation when you have a good and a bad level of oxygen, the results are going to be very, very different as far as the amount of ATP that's going to be produced. 1 molecule of glucose plus 1 oxygen in the mitochondria will give you about 36 to 38 ATP molecules. And the difference is that if you don't have enough oxygen present, you will only produce 2 molecules of ATP with 1 molecule of glucose. As you can see, this difference is 18 times the amount. Here we're talking about 18 times less energy. This is not just a little bit less, that's 18 times the amount of energy. This will obviously affect the energy and normal cellular function of your body. The best way to evaluate and know if you're having good cellular oxygenation or not is by constantly paying attention to yourself and observe your inhaling and exhaling rate. Meaning, if you're breathing and holding your breath just for a few seconds at a time and allowing your body to absorb that oxygen, naturally checking the amount of time that you need to breathe again will be dependent on several factors, such as when you need to naturally swallow, or because you need to breathe, or because you need to contract your diaphragm. Any of these 3 things, and this is not a competition of who can hold their breath for longer, but instead this will help you to create criteria to determine a sort of measurement. And the second aspect to do this is the amount of time that passes until you need to breathe again. This will help you to give you an idea of how much oxygen you have. Know that this is oxygen and it is not in the blood, but inside of your cells. If instead we were trying to measure the amount of oxygen that's in the blood, we could simply use an oximeter to see the saturation in the blood. But obviously this is not just a good mechanism, and the reason is because the difference to have oxygenated blood and there is another to have your hemoglobin, which is the protein that transports the oxygen, to actually release the oxygen. In order to release the oxygen and for that oxygen to reach the muscles and the tissues, is necessary to have good amount of carbon dioxide in your blood. And perhaps this may sound completely opposite to what you've heard, but you can learn more about this simply by searching the Board effect. Why do I mention this? Because if you begin to count the amount of seconds that you can go by without breathing, you will realize that the optimum amount of time that allows good oxygenation in the tissues is 40 seconds. And if you've tried this while you were watching the video, you probably noticed that you could not reach the amount of time, or maybe you did. And this is simply a parameter that lets you understand that your body is lacking oxygen in your tissues. This simple aspect will make you always to have less energy. And on the other hand, if you understood that the raw nutrient for energy production is glucose, and now you understand that you don't need vast amounts of glucose to get this effect. If you've been watching any of the other of my videos, you probably noticed that this is one of the worst things that you can do when it comes to energy and keeping your body at an optimum level. That tiny amount is simply to maintain the levels of glucose stable throughout the day, and we can achieve that by not eating so much food or eating something that will allow you to slowly release those sugars that are naturally within the food. Now, if you understood from a second ago that in order to produce energy, you need a good amount of electrons, you might be saying, oh, this sounds, really amazing, but how can I produce more energy without going to the gym for hours or without having to use my willpower? Well, the answer is actually more simple than you think, because you probably heard of the concept called grounding. Grounding, just like grounding a cable inside of an electric device, it means that you release the stored protons into the ground as you walk barefoot, helping you to ease the production of energy in your organism. And as you can see, this is extremely easy, and you can do it by simply going outside to your patio and stepping either on the grass or the dirt for at least 5 minutes. And there are many devices today that allow you to do just that without having the need to go outside. Although I wouldn't recommend this simply because the effects of walking barefoot on the grass is much more beneficial. Now, how does this come together? And simply to summarize, we saw the need to stabilize our glycemic index, how to oxygenate our tissues, and now this grounding effect. If you combine all these three things, it's going to help you to better your energy production. But what else can we do to increase our energy production? And there are several things that you can do, and I'm going to leave you other videos in the description down below that are also going to help you. But you can also do simple things such as sleeping at an earlier time and also maintaining better eating habits to help you keep your glycemic levels very stable. Lastly, I believe that this is key for you to understand that energy production have a great effect on your emotional state, all of our emotional states. This means that these two aspects are interacting with each other, showing us that we can take advantage, and we can do it by fooling our brain by simply faking into thinking that I have more energy than what I really have. And this is done by simply acting as if you had a lot of energy even when you really don't. The moment we begin to do that, our brain will begin to produce more neurotransmitters by stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. And you can do this small exercise whenever you're trying to go get a cup of water or moving around the house. And as you do this, you will realize and notice that you're much more aware at a neurological state than if you wouldn't have done this. As I just mentioned, this has to do with activating of the sympathetic nervous system, which will increase your energy levels. However, if you tend to be an anxious person, beware, as activating the sympathetic nervous system also stimulates some anxiety symptoms. These are some of the keys that you can use to increase your energy levels without making drastic changes in your life. And if you understood the principle that I mentioned at the beginning of the 3 things that you need for a good production of energy, and those 3 things being the raw nutrients, a manufacturing facility that works, and avoiding mechanisms that can be opposing of the production of this energy, knowing such antagonistic mechanism is important for us to avoid them. And there are a lot, but the one that's important to mention is cortisol. Cortisol is the hormone that you probably know as a stress hormone, but this hormone plays a huge role in many different beneficial processes in our body, which means it's not always bad. But the problem when it comes to our everyday living is the high levels we tend to maintain for things that are not of a life-threatening situation, such as having an argument with the boss or a co-worker. And as the day goes by, we go back to the place of work, and now we have cortisol levels shooting through the roof because you might be expecting another argument. For the people in the past, having high levels of cortisol will be compensated by doing manual labor, which would balance the hormonal levels once again. In today's society, this will be translated as exercising after having high levels of cortisol. The problem here is that almost no one does this. Today, even if we test our cortisol levels, we're going to find out that the population in general already has elevated cortisol. The way this is measured is by having parameters of what is considered normal, but the reality is that those parameters are elevated compared to what they should be. Naturally, this high levels of cortisol will damage our tissues, lower energy levels, and damage our adrenal glands, which are key to maintaining energy levels. The people that are dedicated to high performance, they do advise to take supplements that will help our renal glands and help you fight high levels of cortisol. The simple concept that we've just mentioned are simple enough that anyone can put them into action and allow you to feel better in just a few weeks and fight off the lack of energy. One last thing to understand is that coffee or other things that are sold as energy supplements will give you that short-term stimulation, but on the long term you will become desensitized to this effect. Because of this effect, one thing that you could do is taking some time off, which are periods that allow your body to reset those receptors and start from zero. And this is simple by doing 3 to 5 day periods where you go without the substance to reset yourself and be able to once again have those stimulating effects. And if you like this video, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and consider subscribing, because we'll be posting more videos like this one every week. Join us as we learn more and more about how to improve our lives and our health. Peace.